The blackness of space was absolute. No stars shone through the cockpit window anymore. Just endless void, stretching in all directions. Commander Vexel of the Thalari Confederation sat alone, drifting in a disabled cruiser thousands of light years from any known trade route. His crew was gone, the result of a sudden attack that came without warning or mercy. The enemy had shown no face, no banner, only lasers and EMP bursts that ripped through their shields like paper. Vexel had survived, but barely. The last thing he remembered before losing consciousness was the ship's reactor sputtering out and gravity failing, leaving his body weightless and directionless like a rag doll in the dark. Now he was awake, cold, and truly alone. Systems were dead. Food supplies were minimal. Life support would run out in 70 hours. 70 hours of silence, stillness, and waiting to die. He tried to send out one more distress beacon, but the console sparked against his claws and went dark for good. Static. Always static. The Thalari High Command wouldn't bother looking for a failed captain lost outside jurisdiction. There was no honor in recovery missions. Only shame. He leaned back and closed his eyes. This was it. But then, a strange noise broke through the static. Not a Thalari frequency, something cruder, less refined, ancient in structure. Vexil leaned forward and strained to isolate it. He hadn't heard a voice in nearly 2 days, and this wasn't just a signal. It was a transmission, and it was speaking a language he didn't recognize but could sense the rhythm of. A voice crackled in. "Unidentified vessel, this is Captain Mallory of the Earth Coalition frigate Resolute. You're not showing IFF. Are you in distress?" Vexil's mouth dropped. Earth Coalition? Humans? He scrambled for the Universal Translator module, dusty, rarely used, and nearly forgotten. It buzzed to life weakly, translating the transmission with a grainy undertone. "I repeat, this is Captain Mallory. We're reading low power signatures. Do you require assistance?" Vexil swallowed his pride. His people considered humans primitive, a scattered, violent species that had only recently entered deep space with barely functioning warp tech. Thalari schools taught that humans were brash, unpredictable, and not worth diplomatic effort. But now, alone and dying, Vexil didn't have the luxury of prejudice. He reached for the comms panel, praying it would power up just long enough. "Yes," he croaked, voice dry. "Help, I need—" Static swallowed his words. He banged the panel. "Help me, I am alone." Silence. A full minute passed, and then, "We've got you," the human voice said, this time clearer. "Hold on, we're bringing you in." He stared out into the void, and then it appeared. A sleek, silver vessel broke through the dark like a ghost. It wasn't elegant like Thalari ships, but it was solid, all reinforced hulls and patched armor. It looked like it had survived wars. A ship built for survival, not grace. It anchored itself beside his cruiser. A docking arm extended, and a harsh clunk rang through the hull as the connection was made. Vexil hesitated. What if they took him prisoner? What if this was some trick, a trap? But then again, what did he have to lose? The airlock hissed, and warm light flooded in for the first time in days. He stood, legs trembling, and stepped toward it. The humans had found him. And nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The airlock door slid open with a metallic groan, and Vexil squinted against the sudden brightness. Warm air rushed into his dying ship, bringing with it the scent of metal, oil, and something else. Life. He staggered forward, muscles weak from starvation and atrophy. As his clawed feet crossed the threshold, he was met by 3 humans in dark blue suits, their helmets off, eyes alert but not unkind. One of them, a tall woman with deep brown skin and a scar running down her cheek, stepped forward, "I'm Captain Mallory. You're safe now," she said, her voice firm but not aggressive. Vexil blinked, barely registering her words through the translator strapped to his chest. Safe? That word had almost lost meaning. He gave a slow nod. Thank you. The second human, a man with a wide frame and orange-tinted glasses, handed Mallory a small data pad. She scanned it quickly, and then glanced back at Vexil. "Thalari, right? We've seen a few of your kind out near Deneb space. Never this far into the outer reaches. What the hell were you doing out here?" Vexil hesitated. Should he tell them the truth? That his ship was part of a Black Ops surveillance mission tracking illegal war tech? That they were attacked by an unknown assailant, one that even Thalari High Command didn't officially acknowledge. If he told the humans too much, he risked being treated as a spy. But withholding could be just as dangerous. He settled on part of the truth. "We were on a scouting mission. We were attacked. I don't know who or why." Mallory studied him for a moment. Then she nodded. "Fine. We'll talk more once you're stable. Come on. Medbay's this way." They led him through the ship. The corridors of the Resolute were far from polished. Wires dangled from open panels, floors creaked, and rust edged some of the bulkheads. But there was an energy here, something raw and honest. People passed by, giving him glances, some curious, some wary. One soldier actually nodded at him. No sneers, no disgust, just observation. Humans didn't fear easily, Vexil realized. Or maybe they were just too used to chaos to care. Inside the medbay, a young medic scanned him with a handheld device, murmuring something about dehydration, low protein levels, and muscle breakdown. A nutritional IV was administered quickly, and a warm blanket was draped over his shoulders. He closed his eyes, letting the heat sink in. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he didn't feel like he was dying. Hours passed. Eventually, Captain Mallory returned, pulling a chair beside his bed. "Mind telling me what really happened out there?" she asked. "You're the only ship we've seen in this region in weeks. And that damage, your ship was hit hard." Vexil looked at her. There was no malice in her tone, just curiosity mixed with caution. He sighed. "We were tracking a rogue signal. It moved like a ship but didn't broadcast anything. No comms, no ID. When we got close, it attacked. No warnings, no demands. Just silence and fire." Mallory raised an eyebrow. "Pirates?" "Number too clean, too calculated." There was a long pause. "We've seen something like that too," she finally said. "Back in Sector 7. Took out an entire cargo convoy without a trace. No survivors, just gone." Vexil sat up straighter. "So it wasn't just us?" "Nope," she said grimly. "And it's getting closer to human space." He swallowed hard. A new silence fell between them, heavier than before. "Why did you save me?" he finally asked. "Your people. They don't trust mine." Mallory chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Because you were alive. That's reason enough for now. Besides, we've got enough enemies without turning away the ones who might know what we're up against." She stood, hands on her hips. "You're part of this now, Vexil, like it or not." He looked down at the blanket covering his lap. Human fabric, human kindness, human unpredictability. For a species his people had dismissed as crude and backward, these humans had just become his only lifeline. And somewhere out there, in the black, something far worse than distrust was creeping closer. The Resolute thrummed softly as it cruised through deep space, the sound oddly comforting. Vexil sat upright in the medbay now, a few strength-enhancing injections having brought some vigor back to his limbs. Though he still felt like a shadow of the commander he once was, his senses were sharper, and his instincts were creeping back in. The crew gave him space, but not isolation. A young engineer, Rin, if he remembered her name, had brought him a nutrient bar earlier and even cracked a joke about Thalari digestion being more impressive than human military rations. It had been strange, being treated with casual humanity. He wasn't sure he trusted it. But Captain Mallory, she was different. Hard edges, sharp words, and a gaze that missed nothing. She hadn't spoken to him again since their last conversation, but he'd caught her watching him from across the bridge more than once. Then, one day cycle later, the summons came. He was escorted to the main briefing room, a circular chamber with dim blue lights, hollow screens flickering around the center table. When he entered, Mallory was already seated, arms crossed, jaw tight. Beside her stood two other officers, Lieutenant Cade, her second-in-command, and Dr. Marin, a cybernetics expert whose cold eyes barely hid her skepticism. "Sit," Mallory said. No ceremony, no preamble. Vexel obeyed, folding his limbs tightly to make himself smaller. An old survival habit when surrounded. She tapped the console, and a hologram spun into motion. A star map. Points of red blinked across several systems, scattered but increasingly dense. "These are all reported incidents over the last 5 months. Same profile, no warning, no demands, just destruction." Another tap. A new screen. Fragments of ships, shredded metal, radiation burns that shouldn't be possible with any known weapon. "Whatever's doing this, it doesn't care who you are," she said. "Human, Thalari, Terragorex, even those Arvani trade fleets, gone. And the pattern shows it's moving inward. Something is hunting." Dr. Marin narrowed her eyes. "Tell us again what your ship was tracking before the attack." Vexel felt the weight of every eye in the room. "We intercepted a distress beacon on a dead frequency, something ancient. At first we thought it was a leftover probe from the first expansion wars. But then it moved, not fast, precise, like it wanted us to follow." "And you did," Cade muttered. "Yes," Vexel admitted. "We followed, and it let us get close, before it tore through us. It wanted us to see it, to report it, but we didn't make it back." Marin folded her arms. "So this thing's luring ships out on purpose?" Mallory didn't respond immediately. Instead, she enlarged the red dots on the map. Every single ship destroyed was outside normal travel lanes. Ships that were curious, brave, or stupid. We think this thing is testing us, and it's getting bolder." Vexel exhaled. "You think it's artificial?" "We don't know," Mallory replied. "But we intercepted a similar beacon yesterday. Same dead frequency. This time, closer. It wants us to find it." A tense silence settled over the room. "So?" Vexel asked. "You plan to follow it?" "We have to," Mallory said coldly. "If we don't, someone else will, and they won't come back." He stared at the glowing red pulses. "Then you'll die like we did." Cade looked grim. "Maybe, but we have something you didn't." "What's that?" Vexel asked. Mallory leaned forward. "You." The statement hit harder than he expected. "You've seen it. You survived. Maybe that's luck, or maybe there's something about you that matters to it." Vexel's throat dried. The implication was unsettling. "You want to use me as bait?" "We want to stop this before it reaches core systems," she said, her voice sharp. "If that means putting you in the line again, so be it, but you'll be part of this, one way or another." Vexel stared at them. He should have said no, should have demanded to be dropped at the nearest Thalari outpost, filed a report, and gone back to a safe desk job. But instead, a cold certainty was rising inside him. He had seen something in the darkness, and it had seen him. "I'll help," he said, "but when we find it, don't hesitate. Kill it first, or it will finish what it started." Mallory nodded, her expression unreadable. Then she stood, and with a silent command, the room emptied, leaving only the hum of stars and the growing whisper of something waiting in the dark. The Resolute altered course within the hour. The new destination was a dead sector, uninhabited, unmapped, and absent from most human and Thalari star charts. The beacon was weak, buried beneath radiation waves and signal interference, like it had been meant to be found only by those desperate or foolish enough to look deeper. Captain Mallory stood on the bridge with her arms behind her back, eyes locked on the star map. Vexil stood beside her now, no longer confined to medbay. A fresh suit had been tailored for him, military-grade fabric mixed with regenerative mesh. Human craftsmanship, functional, durable, unceremonious. "You know," she said, still staring at the starfield, "I read about your people in the academy. Brilliant engineers, cold diplomats, arrogant to the bone." "We are what we are," Vexil replied evenly. "Your kind was described as reckless, emotional, and easily provoked." Mallory smirked. "Fair." The silence between them wasn't tense, not anymore. There was a mutual understanding now. Thin, maybe, but present. The kind forged not from trust, but from shared danger. Behind them, the rest of the bridge crew worked quietly. Scanners hummed. Engines pulsed. Then Rin's voice cracked through the comms. "Captain, we're entering the dead zone. Beacon source is approximately 20,000 kilometers out. Still no ID." Mallory turned to Cade. "Bring us to a glide. No active scans, no lights." The lights dimmed, and the engines powered down to minimum thrust. The ship fell into near silence, drifting like a ghost. Vexil felt the hairs on his neck stand. This was how it had started for him before. The quiet, the black, the waiting. He stepped toward the main console. "I want to monitor the passive array." Cade gave him a sideways glance, but Mallory nodded. "Let him." Vexil tuned into the radiation spectrum, isolating the strange signature they'd tracked. The frequency pattern was the same as before, pulsing at long intervals, then breaking off suddenly. But this time, something had changed. He frowned. "It's mimicking decay." Mallory looked at him. "What?" "It's altering its signal to look like background noise. It's hiding itself from your systems, but leaving a thin trace, a trail." Cade leaned in. "Why would it do that? That's not a trap. That's a game." Vexil didn't answer. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. A new alert pinged softly. Rin whispered into her headset. "Captain, we've got a heat bloom. Dead ahead." All eyes turned to the main view. A large object drifted in the dark. Slowly, the Resolute's passive sensors rendered it. A broken cargo hauler, civilian model, twisted and partially collapsed, as if something had crushed it like a tin can. Its hull was scarred with blackened impact burns. No lights, no signals, no survivors. "Jesus," Cade muttered. "Match it with the registry," Mallory ordered. Rin typed rapidly. A few seconds passed. Then her voice returned, tight and shaken. "That ship left Atlas Station 8 days ago, fully crewed, no logs since." 8 days, gone without a trace. And now just floating, silent, brutalized, abandoned. "It's showing signs of artificial tampering," Marin added, appearing from behind. "The hull wasn't breached by weapons. It was pulled open from the inside." Vexil stepped closer to the screen, heart thudding. "That's what it does." Mallory narrowed her eyes. "You said you didn't see what attacked you." "I didn't," he replied, "but we found escape pods like that, bent open, from inside." The tension in the room turned to ice. Then the lights on the bridge flickered. Once, twice, then held. Cade stood from his seat. "What the hell was that?" "No systems anomaly," Rin whispered. "All diagnostics green." Marin's voice was quieter now. "That wasn't from us." Vexel's translator clicked suddenly, a shrill whine pouring through. Then a voice, a garbled, broken mimicry of a human tone, stuttering through static like an echo from something trying to become human. "Come closer. Watch. Learn." Everyone froze. "Trace it!" Mallory barked. "Now!" But Rin's console was dark. Every system read dead, even though the ship still floated in perfect function. And then the beacon on the derelict ship blinked. Once. Then again. Then a third time, in perfect synchronization with the Resolute's internal lights. Vexel turned to Mallory, voice flat. "We're not watching it anymore." She nodded slowly. "It's watching us." The air inside the Resolute grew heavier, not in pressure, just in feeling, as if something vast and patient had just opened its eyes. The flickering stopped, and all systems blinked back to normal, but no one on the bridge moved. The derelict ship still floated just ahead, its open hull a grotesque invitation. The signal had stopped. The mimicry had ended. But its echo still lived in every wall, every console, every breath. Captain Mallory was the first to speak. "Get me a full sweep. Life signs, EM fields, anything." Rin's fingers danced across the console. "Running passive scans. Active would expose us." "Then use what you've got." Vexel's claws tapped rhythmically against the console in front of him. His mind raced. That voice, it hadn't been a true language. It was an emulation, built from intercepted frequencies, maybe even scraped from distress calls and comms chatter. Whatever was behind that signal hadn't just destroyed ships. It had learned from them. "It's using our dead like textbooks," he muttered. Cade turned to him. "You said your crew died before the attack. How?" "They didn't just die," Vexel answered. "They unraveled, like their minds were pulled apart. Some screamed, some just stopped responding. There were no wounds, no fight, just silence. I hid in the maintenance deck for 2 days before whatever it was left us adrift." Dr. Marin added grimly, "Psychotronic weapons? Neural resonance fields?" Vexel shook his head. "No tech I've ever seen. This thing doesn't kill with weapons. It kills with understanding, like it breaks what you are from the inside out." Cade scoffed, uneasy. "You expect us to believe this thing thinks?" Vexel stared at him. "I think it listens. That's worse." Mallory finally turned from the view. "Enough. If that derelict has any data left, we need it. I want an away team suited and armed in 10 minutes. Rin turned, eyes wide. "We're boarding that thing?" "Yes," Mallory said flatly. "And you're not going alone." She looked at Vexel. "You're coming." Vexel hesitated. His blood ran cold. His every instinct screamed no, but something deeper overruled it. "I'll go," he said. "But if I say run, you listen." 10 minutes later, the boarding party assembled in the docking bay. Mallory led it herself, flanked by Cade, Vexel, and 2 Marines, armed with high-frequency plasma cutters and multi-spectrum scanners. They wore dark red EVA suits with reinforced plating, the kind designed for combat zones, not exploration. As the airlock sealed behind them and the tether connected to the derelict, silence took hold again. Real silence. The kind that doesn't belong in space or inside machines. The kind that feels watched. The tunnel shuddered once as they crossed into the dead ship. Immediately, the smell hit them. Even through the helmets, Vexel could taste it in his mouth. Decay and melted plastic. Blood and ozone. The interior was scorched and smeared with something dark and viscous. But what chilled him most wasn't the damage. It was the arrangement. Every panel removed with surgical precision. Wires braided into strange spirals. Crew quarters untouched, but chairs turned inward in perfect circles. No bodies, no signs of panic. Just order. This wasn't destruction, Vexel whispered. It was curation. Keep moving, Mallory ordered, though her voice held a tremor. They made it to the bridge of the derelict. Terminals were dead, but one remained half-active, flickering weakly with stored logs. Cade hooked up a portable power core and began extraction. Marin's voice came through on the shared comms. I've got partial black box recovery, uploading visuals now. Then the screens lit up. Footage appeared, grainy and warped. The crew of the derelict moved normally at first, laughing, chatting, routine comms reports. Then, abruptly, several crew members stopped moving. Not collapsed, just stopped. Others continued as if nothing had happened. Then one of the frozen figures slowly turned to the camera and smiled. Wide, too wide. Then darkness. Another log loaded. Camera view from the engine room. One crewman convulsed, arms flailing. Then he began writing on the wall in oil. Symbols, not human, not Thalari. Symbols like spirals and split circles, repeating again and again. Then his body collapsed, but the writing hand kept moving, detached from its nerve signals, moving like something else was guiding it. The footage ended. Rin's voice cracked over the comms. Captain, I'm detecting a spike. The signal's back, and it's not from the derelict. Mallory's eyes snapped to Vexel. It's here. Vexel turned slowly. Not outside, inside. The walls began to pulse faintly. Then from deep within the derelict's hull, a new sound echoed, wet and mechanical, like breathing through a dying machine. Something had waited for them to arrive. And now it was awake. The sound grew louder, mechanical yet organic, like a heartbeat stitched into rusted gears. It echoed down the empty corridors of the derelict ship, not just vibrating through the air, but crawling beneath their skin. Captain Mallory's voice cut through the comms. Weapons up, formation tight, no one breaks line. The Marines shifted instantly, sweeping their rifles into a forward arc. Cade moved to the rear, his hand trembling slightly on his sidearm. Vexel didn't bother drawing his blade. If this thing was what he remembered, what they all feared, no blade would help. He kept his eyes on the corridor ahead, but it was the walls he feared more. They pulsed faintly, like they were breathing with them, not just around them. Watching. Listening. From the front of the formation, Mallory stepped forward slowly toward the source of the breathing. It's not moving, she said, voice flat. No, Vexel said. It doesn't have to. Cade's scanner suddenly lit up with static. Captain, we've got motion. Multiple pings, 6, no, 8, closing. The breathing stopped, and in the silence that followed, they heard footsteps, but not from in front. Behind them, they turned in sync. The corridor they had come through was empty, but darker now. The lights they'd activated were dimming, one by one, in rhythmic pulses. Rin's voice, shaky over the comms. We just lost your feed. Visual blackout. You're not showing up on sensors anymore. We're still in the corridor, Mallory snapped. Rin, rewrote visuals. I can't. It's like the ship's absorbing them. Your signals aren't bouncing back. That's when the first shape appeared, at the edge of the dark, just out of clear view. A silhouette, vaguely humanoid, impossibly tall, arms too long, posture wrong, and where the head should have been. Only a blur, like something was rejecting the human eye. Mallory raised her rifle. Identify yourself. The thing didn't move. It simply watched, or stood as if it was watching. Vexel's chest tightened. He felt the same weight as before, when his crew died, when they were unmade. It doesn't respond to logic, he whispered, or language. It reacts to attention. What the hell does that mean? Cade hissed. Don't look at it. But it was too late. The second Marine, Collins, had locked eyes with the silhouette. He lowered his weapon slightly. Then he screamed. His body jerked violently, like being yanked by invisible cords. His helmet cracked from within. His eyes went white. Then, silence. His body stood still for a moment, perfectly balanced, then collapsed. Mallory shouted, "Fall back! Move!" They turned and ran, back down the corridor toward the boarding tether. Lights strobed overhead now, the environment shifting subtly as they passed, like the very walls were reshaping themselves. Cade skidded around a corner, breathing hard. "What the hell is this thing?" "It's not a thing," Vexel said, chest heaving. "It's intention wearing a body. It learns what we fear, and then it becomes it." They reached the docking hatch. Marin's voice cut through. "Opening the tunnel! Get out now!" But the hatch remained locked. Lights turned red. "We're locked out!" Cade shouted, hammering the panel. "No, it locked us out," Vexel growled. "It's inside the system." Behind them, a low hum began, then a voice, calm, familiar. It was Colin's voice. "Don't run. Stay. Understand?" They all turned. Colin's body stood in the hallway again, head cracked open, face slack yet speaking. "You brought the question. I am the answer." Vexel drew his sidearm and fired. Plasma tore through the body, ripping it apart, but no blood spilled. Only black, thread-like tendrils twisted from within, writhing before dissolving into dust. Then the hatch unlocked with a clang. "Go!" Mallory shouted. They leapt through the tunnel, boots hammering metal. Vexel was the last through, sealing the airlock behind him. Cade vomited into his helmet. One Marine sobbed quietly, curled against the bulkhead. Back on the Resolute, Mallory ripped off her helmet. "Cut the tether. Now!" Rin hesitated. "Now!" The tether blew, and the derelict ship drifted slowly away. On the main screen they watched as it began to fold in on itself, like it was collapsing through dimensions, imploding without mass. Within seconds, it was gone. No light, no trace, just the void. Only silence. No one spoke. Mallory sat heavily in the command chair. "We poked a hole into something that doesn't want to be understood," she said. "And now it knows us." Vexel sat across from her, staring into the black. "No," he said quietly. "It already did. We just woke it up." The ship was quiet for a long time after they cut the tether. Too quiet. Not the peaceful silence of relief, but the kind that creeps into your lungs like smoke, making it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to forget what you've seen. The crew had gone through post-boarding decontamination procedures in mechanical, almost ritualistic fashion. Suits stripped, scrubbed, blood tests drawn, neural scans ran twice. Everyone passed. Everyone except Cade. Dr. Marin pulled Mallory aside in the medbay and spoke in a hushed tone. But Vexel heard them. His ears weren't like a human's. He could hear heartbeat shifts from across the hall, detect nervous tension in voice frequencies. "What do you mean, resonance contamination?" Mallory asked tightly. "He's fine physically," Marin replied. "Vitals steady, but his neural scan is off, almost like it's echoing something external. I've never seen anything like it." "Is it dangerous?" "I don't know yet." Mallory exhaled sharply and looked through the glass. Cade sat on the medbay bench, looking dazed. His eyes tracked movement that wasn't there. His fingers twitched in small spirals, unconsciously. Vexel turned away. He'd seen that pattern before. His navigator had drawn the same shapes on the cockpit walls just days before she lost her mind. In the command room, the crew reviewed the recovered data logs from the derelict. The footage they had seen earlier wasn't even the worst of it. There were fragments of transmissions, half-sent messages of panic, stuttering voices, and one clear image of a crew member trying to claw their own helmet off in a sealed chamber. Then came the whispers, low, layered, in a dozen tongues at once. Not a thing, pattern and memory. Blood is language. You are a question, not the answer. Mallory leaned over the console, eyes bloodshot. Delete it, all of it. Burn it out of the database. You sure? Rin asked hesitantly. This could be first contact. It's not contact, Vexel interrupted, stepping into the room. It's contagion. That ship was sick with it, and now so are we. She turned to him. You think it followed us? No, he said. It never left. Mallory's jaw clenched. What the hell is it then? Vexil hesitated. Then he stepped forward and pointed to the screen. This signal, this mimicry, it's not communication. It's an infection vector. It doesn't need ships or weapons. It just needs your attention. The more you try to understand it, the more it changes you. Dr. Marin entered, holding a tablet. Her face was pale. We just lost Cade. Mallory's eyes widened. What do you mean, lost? He's gone. 1 second he was in his room. Next, the door was open, but he wasn't there. There's no trace on any security cam. It's like he blinked out. No one just disappears on my ship, Mallory shouted. Marin swallowed. Captain, come see this. She pulled up the last cam footage of Cade's quarters. He sat on his bed, head low. Then, slowly, he lifted his face to the camera and smiled, too wide, too unnatural, then static. Mallory watched in stunned silence. That smile. Vexil nodded slowly. That's not him anymore. That's it, wearing his face. We brought something back, Mallory whispered, or it let us leave, so it could come with us. They stared at the dark monitor. Then Rin's voice came over the intercom. Captain, we just picked up a signal. Everyone froze. Mallory rushed to the bridge. Show me. A familiar pulse blinked on screen. Same frequency, same pattern. But this time it wasn't coming from space. It was coming from inside the Resolute. Somewhere deep in the engine core, the ship was broadcasting. Vexil's voice was barely above a whisper. It's already seated. It's in your systems. Maybe in your people, maybe in me. The screen began to warp, distorting in soft pulses like breathing. Then the lights flickered. And that awful voice returned, split across speakers and internal comms, sounding more human now, more confident. You hear me now? You brought me home. Mallory stared at the screen, jaw clenched, rage and fear behind her eyes. What the hell are you? She demanded. The voice replied, calm and cruel. I am the mirror you stared into too long. The engine room was a tomb. Red lights pulsed across the floor in irregular patterns, casting long, warping shadows that moved just a fraction too slowly, like they lagged behind reality. The air crackled with static, and every console, screen, and circuit board along the walls displayed one repeating symbol, a perfect spiral, drawn in crude strokes, spinning endlessly. Mallory, Vexil, and a small security unit stood at the threshold, weapons raised. Behind them, Rin's voice buzzed in over comms from the bridge, shaking. Whatever it is, it's rewriting the ship's code, not just hacking, altering, like it's teaching the ship to think differently. Vexil scanned the room. It's not inside our systems anymore. It is the system. Mallory clenched her jaw. Then we kill the system. They moved deeper in. Cade's voice played over the internal speakers, soft, eerily calm. Come see, come understand. We don't die, we change. The Marines exchanged wary glances. I've got movement, one whispered. Right flank, no visual. The group spun, but saw nothing. Then came the humming, low, intimate, like a lullaby sung through broken teeth. and from the shadows they stepped out. Figures in EVA suits, twisted, the crew from the derelict, or what was left of them. Their bodies distorted, elongated limbs cracked into wrong angles but still functioning. Their faces were smeared with smiles they hadn't earned. Behind their helmets, where eyes should be, only spirals spun like tiny galaxies. Vexel gripped his weapon tighter. They're not alive. They're interpreted. It's wearing their memories like a coat. Mallory raised her rifle. Permission to end the interpretation? Granted. The first shot rang out, striking one of the twisted crew in the chest. It stumbled backward, but didn't fall. Instead, it mimicked the shot sound back at them, perfectly, like a recording, and laughed. A dozen voices layered into one. The air shimmered, the lights shattered, then the room exploded into chaos. The things charged, silent, fast, and wrong. The Marines opened fire, ripping through them, but for everyone that fell, 2 more emerged from the bulkheads like phantoms from a dream. Mallory fought like hell, firing burst after burst, but she could feel the pressure building, not just around them, but within. Something was pushing at her mind, whispering in forgotten tongues, trying to replace her thoughts with questions that never ended. What is your name when no one is looking? What is the shape of fear? What is memory if it lies to you? Her hands trembled. Beside her, Vexil reached the core. The main control column stood in the center, tall, black, and cracked open like a blooming flower. Wires twitched like veins. The spiral symbol pulsed at its base, beating like a second heart. "This is it," he yelled. "It's coiled in here. This is the infection point." Mallory tossed him a charge pack. "End it!" He didn't hesitate. Clawed fingers dug into the circuitry. The system screamed, actually screamed, as if it knew what was happening. Voices surged through the ship's comms, echoing down the corridors like a choir in agony. "You cannot unsee. You cannot unknow. You invited me in." Vexil jammed the explosive deep into the processor, then ran. "Charges set. Detonation in 30 seconds. Mallory grabbed the last surviving Marine and pulled him toward the exit. One of the infected crew tried to block their path, but Vexil barreled into it, slamming it against the wall with brute force. Its smile twisted, then cracked like glass. They made it out of the engine room just as the detonation went off. The explosion didn't shake the ship. It silenced it, instantly. No static, no voices, no flickering lights. The screaming stopped. The ship exhaled. And then, stillness. Back on the bridge, Rin stood with tears running down her face. "It's gone," she whispered. "No signal. Nothing in the core. It's gone." Mallory slumped into her chair, covered in grime and blood. She looked over at Vexil, who stared out into space. "Do you think we killed it?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "You don't kill an idea. You bury it, and hope no one digs it back up." Silence settled again, but this time it felt different, real. Later, in the ship's log, Mallory wrote, "We found something in the dark. Something that doesn't care about planets or politics. It only wants minds, questions, attention. We looked too long. It looked back. We won, for now. But we left behind a message in our wreckage. And if someone finds it, they'll hear the whisper too." Vexil never returned to the Thalari Confederation. He stayed aboard the Resolute, quiet and watchful, because he knew better than anyone. The silence of space isn't empty. It's listening. The ship floated silently through the dark vacuum, its hull scorched and gouged like it had been through hell itself. To the untrained eye, it looked like debris, just another hunk of dead metal adrift in the endless night. But the moment the Tyrval patrol cruiser picked it up on long-range sensors, alarms were triggered. Not because of what it was, but because of where it came from. Commander Valeth, we've intercepted an object drifting out of the Kranix expanse. The markings are unclear, but the trajectory traces back to designation 9X7. The bridge of the Tyrval cruiser fell deathly silent. Every officer on the deck knew that designation by heart. The Galactic Registry didn't even bother with a name. It was simply Class 15 Death World, 9X7. The kind of world that bred extinction-level predators in the water, land, and air. A planet so violent, so biologically hostile, that even the most aggressive alien species refused to land scout drones on its surface. It had swallowed every probe, disintegrated every ship, and erased every trace of life that dared to analyze it. No one survived 9X-7. No one visited 9X-7. It was a cosmic red flag. Abandon all hope. So when a ship came out of that place, the entire Galactic Patrol took notice. Valeth narrowed his eyes. Any life signs? Faint, but yes, deep within the core structure. The readings are chaotic. We're not sure what species. Valeth stood slowly from his command chair. Get the containment crews ready, and prepare the auto-defense drones. If something came out of that world, I don't care if it's half dead. We don't take chances. The vessel was a jagged, asymmetrical thing, an insult to traditional galactic engineering, built like a brick, armored like a tank, and welded together in defiance of every law of vacuum physics. No aesthetics, no elegance, just brutal efficiency. Inside, it was worse. Rusted corridors, scratched-up bulkheads, wires hanging like exposed veins. When the Tyrval team breached the outer hull, they expected carnage. They found something else entirely. Dozens of cryopods lined the inner hold. Most were empty, shattered long ago. Some had been manually shut down. But 5 were still active. 1 blinked red. Life signs detected. The bioscan flickered. It didn't match any known galactic species. The computer threw up a name from the oldest Terran database still circulating in black site archives. Species, Homo sapiens. Origin, planet Earth. Status, extinct, unverified. Threat level, variable. Notes, aggressively adaptive, highly resilient, illogical behavior patterns, avoid direct confrontation. Valeth stared at the file, jaw tightening. Humans. His second-in-command, Jarrow, took a step back. I thought they were gone, lost to war, disease, madness. They were, or so we believed. But this ship came from 9X7. Valeth looked at the vessel again with fresh dread. And if that hellworld was home to them, what the hell does that make us? They brought the active pod aboard, kept it sealed in 6 layers of quarantine. The thing inside wasn't large, barely over 6 feet tall by their measurements, but its vitals were steady, and its body showed a history of trauma most species wouldn't survive. A shattered femur that had reknit with rudimentary surgery, a missing lung replaced by a crude cybernetic pump, skin burned and regrown multiple times. This human had lived war, not just once, but repeatedly, like it was built for it. 3 days later, it woke up. It didn't panic. It didn't shout or cry. It sat up, stared through the glass, and blinked slowly. Then it smiled. That was the moment Valeth's crew knew they were in trouble. Because that smile, it wasn't relief. It wasn't confusion. It was something colder. It was confidence. As if waking up in an alien ship after drifting out of a death world was just another Tuesday for this thing. When they opened the communication feed, the human leaned toward the microphone. "Where the hell am I?" asked Jace Markle, voice gravelly, laced with exhaustion and sarcasm. "And is there coffee, or am I going to have to break someone's neck to get a cup?" The translator scrambled to keep up. Valeth stared at the screen. and then the whisper began to spread through the fleet. The humans survived 9x-7. That world didn't kill them. They tamed it. Valeth didn't answer the human right away. He simply stared at the monitor, at that tired, half-grinning face behind the quarantine glass. The human's eyes scanned the room on the other side, noting every camera, every sensor, every angle. He wasn't just looking. He was assessing, cataloging, like a predator dropped into a new hunting ground. Jaro leaned in close. "Sir, do we respond?" The translator is still filtering his phrasing. Apparently, break someone's neck is an Earth idiom. "No," Valeth said coldly. "It's not an idiom." He stepped back from the console, jaw tight. The room was filled with trained officers from one of the most powerful species in the Galactic Patrol. Yet there was something deeply unsettling about that single human sitting behind glass. The readings showed his body was still in recovery. Malnourished, low oxygen, blood toxicity, but his stare was sharp, aware, and most of all, unafraid. Valeth activated the mic. "You are aboard a Tyrval cruiser under the Galactic Enclave. You emerged from a ship traced to Deathworld 9x7. State your name and purpose." The human chuckled. "You mean Earth?" Valeth froze. Earth? That name hadn't been uttered in over 2 centuries, the last known location of the human race, marked as self-extinct after a series of planetary wars and environmental collapses. A dead rock. Yet this man had the audacity to correct them? Earth, Valeth repeated slowly. The name humans gave to 9x-7. The human's smile faded. His voice dropped an octave. "You call it a death world. We called it Tuesday. Now stop stalling. Where's my crew?" Valeth glanced at Jaro, then back at the human. "Only 1 pod was active. The rest were either destroyed or empty." The human's expression didn't break, but the twitch in his jaw said enough. He lowered his head for a moment, silent, fists clenched. Then he looked back up. "I see," he muttered. "So that's it, huh? Guess I'm the last one?" Valeth cleared his throat. "Your ship. It was a combat-class vessel, repurposed, heavily armored, built to withstand extreme environments. How long were you down there?" The human stared through him. "We crashed 2 years ago, 17 of us, survivors from the Calderon, a long-range colony ship. We made it work, hunted what we could, rebuilt systems, modified the ship from scrap, lost people along the way, disease, predators, starvation, you name it." He paused, a flicker of memory in his eyes. "They died hard, every one of them, fighting to stay alive," Jaro whispered behind Valeth. 2 years. On that world. The Tyrval had studied Deathworld 9x7. Its atmosphere was barely breathable. Temperatures swung from sub-zero to volcanic in a single day. The predators were nightmarish hybrids, acid-spitting serpents, land sharks with armor-plated hides, flying scavengers with neurotoxins in their claws. Even microbes on that planet could melt flesh in hours. No known species could survive more than a week. And yet, this human had lasted 2 years. Valeth returned to the mic. "Your name?" The man hesitated. Then, simply, "Captain Jace Markle." Valeth turned off the mic, stepping aside. "Full genetic sequencing. Find out how much of this story is true, and do not, under any circumstances, open that chamber." The medtechs worked swiftly. They weren't used to human DNA. It had become a footnote in xenobiology texts, a cautionary tale of self-destruction. But what they found shocked them. Captain Jace Markle wasn't just human. He was enhanced. Radiation-scarred mitochondria, mutated but stable. Skeletal reinforcement consistent with improvised bone grafting. Muscle density 40% higher than Tyrval baseline. Brain scans showing cortical anomalies. evidence of neural stress tolerance far beyond most sapients. This wasn't just a survivor. He was built by hell itself. Later that night, as Valeth reviewed the files alone in his quarters, a private alert pinged. A technician had attempted to decrypt the black box from Jace's ship. What they found wasn't a technical log. It was a journal. Day 12. Lost Marquez to the sky leeches. Took half his skull. Buried what was left under a thermal vent. Kira's leg is infected. I used engine oil and fire to seal the wound. Crude, but she's alive. She asked me if we'd ever leave. I lied. Day 106. The native apex predator learned to mimic our emergency signals. Lured Owen out. We killed it, but too late. Ripped Owen's spine out. We rigged it as a tripwire for its kind. They don't like their own bones. Something instinctual. Day 434. We're running out of time. We think we found a way to launch the ship again. Barely. Kira's dying. I promised I'd get her off this rock. I promised all of them. Valeth closed the file, hand trembling. This man, this human, had fought through conditions that should have broken gods. And yet, Jace Markell had walked out of that nightmare alive. The next morning, Valeth returned to the observation room. The human was awake, eating the ration paste like it was steak. "You'll need to answer more questions," Valeth said. Jace shrugged. "Sure, but here's a better idea. How about you start answering mine?" Valeth tilted his head. "Why would we do that?" Jace stood slowly, that same quiet confidence in his step. "Because if humans made 9x-7 their home," he stepped forward, eyes locked. "What do you think we'll do to you if you try to cage us?" Valeth didn't respond right away. He felt a strange chill ripple through his upper spine, a biological reflex the Tyrval species hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. Not the kind born of danger, but the kind born of not understanding the thing in front of you. Jace Markell stood behind the reinforced quarantine glass, arms crossed, not threatening, not raising his voice, just watching. Calculating. Valeth finally said, "No one is trying to cage you, Captain. We're trying to understand." Jace tilted his head. "Understanding doesn't start with a gun at my head and a quarantine cell." Valeth narrowed his eyes. "You emerged from a ship that survived the deadliest ecosystem in known space. Your species was marked extinct. Your physiology is radically altered. Tell me, Captain, how should we have greeted you?" Jace grinned, that sharp, knowing grin. "Coffee and pancakes would have been a good start." The translator stuttered for a moment. Jaro, standing behind Valeth, muttered, "What's a pancake?" Jace laughed to himself. "Exactly." Silence followed. Valeth finally said, "We're processing the black box from your ship. The journal entries are disturbing." Jace didn't flinch. "Yeah, it was a disturbing planet." "Kira, she was one of yours?" Jace blinked slowly. His mouth opened, then closed again. Something cracked in his expression, just for a heartbeat. "She was the last one left. I promised her we'd make it. I promised we'd get home." He swallowed hard. "I lied again." For the first time, Valeth didn't see a monster. He saw a man who had lost everything, over and over, and still kept going. Not because he believed he'd survive, but because someone else needed him to pretend they would. That kind of endurance wasn't bravery. It was madness wrapped in love. And it was dangerous. Valeth stepped back from the mic. "End the interview." "But sir," Jaro started. "End it," Valeth snapped. They shut off the comms. The glass went opaque. "Commander," Jaro whispered, voice low, "if this is what humans are now, then what were they before extinction?" Valeth didn't answer. His thoughts were racing. Across the galaxy, the Enclave was already receiving fragments of the Discovery. An extinct species had survived a Class 15 death world. There would be panic, fear, opportunists, warmongers. There would be interest. He needed control. Fast. A few hours later, in the central conference hall of the cruiser, Valeth called a private meeting. Only 4 officers were present, all senior command. The lights were dim. A silent alarm ensured recording systems were offline. "I want full genetic duplication," Valeth said, voice cold. "Back up Jace Markell's DNA and isolate the adaptive traits. We'll forward samples to Enclave Biogenetics for testing." One of the officers stiffened. "That's a violation of the Galactic Preservation Accord." "So is surviving a planet no one was meant to live on." "You think we can use this?" Valeth leaned forward. "If one human did this, imagine what 1,000 could do, trained, equipped, unleashed. They're extinct on paper. That means no protections, no citizenship. We control their narrative." Jarrow flinched. "Sir, he's not an asset. He's a warning." Valeth looked at him coldly. "And warnings are only dangerous if we ignore them." Back in the medical bay, Jace paced the small chamber. The opaque glass flickered, revealing his reflection. He leaned in and whispered, "I know you're listening." No response. "You're going to want to test me, study me, maybe even copy me." He leaned closer. "I wouldn't recommend it." Then he walked to the far corner and sat down cross-legged, breathing slow and deep. 2 decks above, the biogenetics lab had already begun processing the DNA samples. The lead researcher, a Gatev splicer with 4 nimble arms and a reputation for pushing ethics, analyzed the first simulation of Markell's cell regeneration. He froze. The cells weren't just repairing themselves. They were learning. Each simulated trauma made the next repair faster, smarter. The DNA was rewriting itself in real time. "By the void," the Gatev murmured. "They don't adapt to survive. They survive to adapt." The room behind him went dark. Suddenly, all the lights across the ship dimmed. Main power surged, then dropped to critical levels. And in the medbay, Jace stood up. The emergency lights bathed him in red. A robotic voice crackled over the ship-wide intercom. "Containment breach detected in quarantine chamber." Valeth's comms screamed, "We have a system override, unknown origin." Jace Markell smiled once more as the locks on his cell clicked. "I warned you," he said. The medbay plunged into chaos as alarms shrieked, and red lights pulsed in the walls like a dying heartbeat. Medical drones buzzed to life, scrambling toward Jace's chamber, but they stopped halfway, hovering in place like they'd hit an invisible wall. They didn't malfunction. They refused to go closer. Valeth raced through the corridor, his boots pounding against the metallic floor as emergency sirens howled overhead. Officers swarmed past him in panic. Gun squads scrambled toward the medbay. Jarrow was already shouting into his wrist link, trying to isolate the breach. "This wasn't from outside," he yelled. "Sir, this was an internal override. The quarantine door was unlocked from the inside." Valeth skidded to a stop. "How? That chamber's sealed with 6-tier biometric encryption." Jarrow looked back at him, pale and shaking. "Then either someone gave him the code, or he figured it out on his own." That thought hit Valeth like a blade through the chest. Impossible. No species could read a tier-val crypto code without years of training, not without advanced equipment or insider knowledge. But humans didn't follow rules. They bent them, broke them, rewrote them. Valeth stormed into the outer corridor of the medbay and raised his hand to signal his troops. "Do not engage unless ordered," he commanded. "If he's still in the room, we—" Then the lights flickered. The door was already open. And Jace was gone. All that remained was the shattered remains of a chair, one disarmed drone, sparking in a twitching heap, and a handprint smeared in blood on the wall. but it wasn't Jace's blood. Valeth stared at it, unsettled. Then Jaro stepped forward, scanning the print. "Sir, this isn't Tirval blood either." Valeth frowned. "Then whose is it?" Jaro turned the scanner toward him. "Gutev, biogenetic researcher, the one who first decoded Jace's DNA." Valeth's stomach turned cold. "Security feed. Blacked out. He was the first to see the adaptive scan. It must have triggered Jace somehow." "Or," Valeth muttered, "he tried to use Jace as a sample." "And paid for it." A comm crackled in Valeth's earpiece. "Commander, we've got movement. Deck 4, engineering section." Valeth turned, already running. By the time they reached the engineering deck, Jace had already taken out 2 more guards, non-lethally. One was locked inside a tool closet, sedated. The other was zip-bound to a coolant pipe, with an apologetic note taped to his chest. "Nothing personal. Wrong place, wrong orders." Valeth stared at the note in disbelief. "Is he mocking us?" Jaro asked. "No," Valeth said grimly. "He's sending a message." He tapped into the ship's PA system. "Captain Jace Markle, you are aboard a vessel of the Galactic Enclave. Your actions constitute a breach of protocol and hostile intent. Surrender immediately, and you won't be harmed." There was a pause. Then Jace's voice filtered back through the system, unamplified, raw, sarcastic. "You're gonna have to forgive me if I don't trust the whole 'surrender and you won't be harmed' bit. Not after the sedatives, scans, and attempted vivisection." Jaro flinched. "He knows what we tried to do to him." Jace continued, calm and casual. "Look, I didn't come here to cause trouble. I woke up in a cell, watched your scientists dig through my blood like it was candy, and realized real quick, I'm not a guest here. I'm a specimen. That never ends well in alien stories." Valeth stepped forward, cutting the feed. "He's not just surviving. He's learning our systems, fast." They scanned the area. No trace. Jaro turned to Valeth again, this time quieter. "He's not trying to escape. If he was, he'd have taken a shuttle by now. You think he's doing something else?" Valeth looked toward the primary data core room. "He's headed for the archives." "Why?" "Because if he's half as smart as I think he is, he wants to know what happened to Earth." Deep in the archive room, Jace stared at the holoscreen as thousands of files streamed past. The records were garbled, encrypted, rewritten. But he saw enough. Earth hadn't died in war. Not exactly. The Enclave had declared the planet unfit for development, marked it as an ecological hazard, and enforced a containment protocol. In other words, they'd abandoned them, cut them off. No aid, no support, no evacuation. They left humanity to die. Not because they were dangerous, but because they were inconvenient. He pulled up the last surviving image in the archive. Earth, burning under a red sky, its oceans boiled down, its cities flooded or cracked apart. They hadn't survived in spite of the universe. They'd survived because the universe tried to erase them, and failed. Behind him, the door hissed open. Valeth stepped in, alone. No guards, no weapons drawn. Jace didn't turn. "So now you know," Valeth said quietly. Jace's voice was hollow. "You left us to rot." Valeth exhaled slowly. The Council believed humanity was unstable, too wild, too unpredictable. They thought isolation was the only answer. Jace finally turned. "You made a death world, and we made it a home." Valeth looked him in the eyes. "That's what scares them most." Jace took one step forward, then another. "No, what should scare you," he said, voice like steel, "is that we're coming back." Valeth didn't reach for his weapon. He knew better. There was a line in Jace Markle's eyes that couldn't be crossed, not without blood being spilled. And while the Tirval were no strangers to war, this was different. This wasn't war. This was vengeance wrapped in discipline. I believe you, Valeth said finally. But I need to know something. Jace stood still, silent. Valeth continued. Are you alone? A flicker of something unreadable passed across Jace's face. His eyes narrowed just slightly, just enough for Valeth to know he hit something. Jace said nothing. Valeth took a slow step forward. You said 17 people survived the crash. We only found your pod. The others were dead or empty. But your black box mentioned attempts to launch again. Not just to escape, but to transmit coordinates. He watched Jace carefully. Did any of them make it off the planet before you did? Jace exhaled through his nose. It wasn't a denial. We sent out a decoy pod first. Had to. Kira was too weak to travel. I rigged the signal to draw attention toward me, not them. His voice lowered. We had to gamble. Valeth's heart dropped. So there could be more of you out there. There are more, Jace said, almost like a vow. And if they survived like I did, they're not going to come back quietly. Not after what you did. Valeth turned toward the screen. The last image of Earth still glowed dimly in the corner. Battered, broken, scarred, and yet still spinning. What do you plan to do now? Valeth asked. Jace shrugged. First, find out what your council's hiding. You don't seal off an entire species without a reason. You bury them because you're afraid of what they'll dig up. Valeth hesitated. And after? Jace walked toward him slowly. I'm going to wake your galaxy up. The silence that followed was oppressive. Then Jace reached down and pulled a small metal shard from his belt. Triangular, black, humming faintly. Valeth recognized it instantly. That's Tirval military-grade data encryption tech, Valeth said sharply. That was never issued to... I pulled it from your ship's belly, Jace cut in. Your Gitev scientist was logging real-time bioadaptation trials and sending them off-world. You were never studying me for knowledge. You were trying to weaponize me. Valeth felt the truth slam into him like gravity. Gitev splicers had been under quiet orders to harvest anything useful from recovered species, even if it meant breaking the laws of bioethics. But no one ever expected humans to fall into that category. They were supposed to be extinct, untouchable, ghosts of the past, not this. You want to know why we survived Earth? Jace said, stepping closer. It wasn't our tech. It wasn't strength. It wasn't even luck. He tapped his head. It was because no one told us we couldn't. Valeth swallowed hard. Then Jace tossed the encrypted chip into his hands. Consider this a favor, he said. Everything your people tried to steal from me, I'm giving it back. Valeth looked down at the device. But understand, Jace continued, his voice like frost, I won't give the others that same courtesy. They'll come armed, angry, and trained by a planet designed to kill gods. He stepped past Valeth toward the exit. Lock me up again if you want. Strip my DNA. Run your tests. None of it matters now. The Enclave will know I'm alive. And if they try to hide it, he smiled, then I'll teach them what it means to fear humans again. The doors slid open for him. Valeth didn't stop him. He couldn't. Instead, he stared at the chip in his hands, the knowledge, the science, the truth, and knew in his core that something had changed, not just in this ship, in the entire galaxy. Somewhere out there, more survivors might still be waking up. Somewhere out there, the stars were shifting. And somewhere, Earth wasn't a grave anymore. It was a signal, a warning that humanity, thought buried in dust and ash, was not just alive, but returning. And this time, they weren't coming in peace. The ship's corridors felt different now, quieter, heavier, not because of any change in lighting or temperature, but because everyone knew. Jace Markle was no longer a captive. He was a presence. And the ship, despite its walls of steel and its protocols carved in ancient laws, felt like it had let something inside it that didn't belong, something raw and untamed, something that shouldn't have survived, and yet had. Valeth sat alone in the strategy chamber, the encryption chip Jace had given him resting on the table like a loaded weapon. It pulsed faintly, a heartbeat of stolen data. Beside it, his terminal glowed with the Council's latest message. Do not engage. Do not transmit beyond Level 4 clearance. Maintain containment, reinforcements en route. Containment. Like Jace was some wild virus to box up and study. Valeth leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. He had seen war. He had watched planets burn. But he had never seen what he saw in that human's eyes. Grief sharpened into precision. That was the thing about Markel. He wasn't just a survivor. He was a soldier forged in desperation and held together by the memory of the ones he lost. And now, that soldier was loose on a ship that barely understood what he represented. A knock came at the door. Enter. Jarrow stepped in, visibly tense. We have a situation. Valeth nodded for him to continue. The communications array just picked up a ping, not a standard signal. It's encrypted in a waveform pattern. Human. Pre-extinction Earth code. Valeth sat upright. Location? Outer sector, beyond the Yavari Nebula. It's bouncing between relay points like it's trying to mask its origin. But we triangulated the source. It's a ship. Small but fast. Civilian-built. Registered to a name that's not in our archive. Valeth's eyes narrowed. Say it. Jarrow hesitated. Kira Thorne. Silence. Valeth rose slowly from his chair. I thought she died. So did Jace. Valeth turned to the wall console, bringing up the nav map. A blinking red dot pulsed in the corner of the screen, moving, alive. She made it out, Valeth whispered. She's still alive. Jarrow leaned in. If she's anything like Markel, we're not ready for her. No, Valeth said. We're not. Jace stood in the observation chamber now, arms crossed, staring out at the infinite stars. He could feel the shift in the ship, hear the hurried footsteps, the whispers behind him, the sense of contained panic. They didn't know what to do with him. Good. He didn't know what to do with them either. He'd grown used to silence. Earth was full of noise, but 9x-7 had taught him to appreciate the quiet. The breathing of trees, the movement of dirt, the subtle hum of predators stalking nearby. You didn't survive by being louder. You survived by watching everything. He heard the door open behind him. Valeth stepped in, slowly, no weapons, no guards. We picked up a signal, Valeth said quietly. Jace turned, one eyebrow raised. Kira, Valeth added. She's alive. For a second, Jace didn't move. Then, like something old and fragile breaking loose inside him, he whispered, She made it. Valeth nodded. She's heading toward a moon in the Vega system. Likely for repairs. Our scans show she's not alone. Jace squinted. How many? Valeth paused. 2, maybe 3 others. All human. Jace stepped forward, the fire returning to his voice. They survived the other dropships. Seems so. Jace exhaled hard, like he'd been holding his breath for 2 years. And then, for the first time since he woke up on this ship, he smiled. Not the cold, calculating smirk he wore like armor, but something real, something wounded but still breathing. Valeth studied him. What will you do when you find them? Rebuild. And after that? Jace turned back toward the stars. Make the bastards who left us there pay. Valeth didn't flinch. He understood now. The Council had created this future when they sealed off Earth, when they left an entire species to burn instead of lifting a hand. That wasn't survival of the fittest. It was the birth of a new kind of predator, one that looked human, but wasn't quite anymore. Valeth said, "I can delay the council. A few days, maybe send a fake report." Jace glanced sideways. "Why?" Valeth hesitated. Then, "Because I think I'd rather have you as a friend than an enemy." Jace held out his hand. "Smart man." They shook, and just like that, the galaxy shifted again. Because the last known human wasn't alone anymore, and this time, they had allies. The rendezvous point was a fractured moon orbiting a burnt-out gas giant, officially catalogued as Vega 12b, but long forgotten by galactic cartographers. Its surface was cracked like a shattered egg, littered with mining debris from a colony that failed over a century ago. No one came here anymore, which made it the perfect place to meet the ghosts of humanity. Jace stood at the edge of the shuttle's ramp, his boots crunching against the dust. The thin, craven atmosphere tasted metallic, bitter. It reminded him of home. Valeth had honored his word. He'd faked a damage report to buy Jace a 2-day window. No patrols, no surveillance, but it wouldn't last. The council wasn't stupid, and they sure as hell weren't merciful. A small ship rested 50 meters away, built from salvage like Jace's, but sleeker. Smarter. Scavenged parts stitched together with human stubbornness and wild genius. He could see the patches welded onto the hull, the faded letters spray-painted near the docking clamp. Stormbird. A name only humans would give a ship that should have died in space. The hatch hissed open. Kira stepped out. At first, Jace didn't move. His brain couldn't accept it. Not until she took another step, and he saw the limp in her leg, the way her jaw clenched with every movement, the fire still burning behind her eyes. Then he ran. They collided hard, arms locked tight, like gravity had finally remembered how to work again. Neither of them spoke at first. Just breathing. Just holding. "I thought you were dead," she whispered into his shoulder. "I almost was," he replied. "Twice." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "You look like shit," he laughed. "You should see the other guy." Then came the others. 3 survivors. 2 men, 1 woman, all scarred, all changed. But their eyes told the same story. They had crawled through hell too, and like Jace, they'd brought hell back with them. They sat around a portable emitter that flickered with warmth and light. It wasn't much, just a hologram fire and a box of rehydrated food packs. But it felt real enough. They caught up in pieces. None of them wanted to talk about the worst parts. But they all knew. Kira explained what happened after Jace's decoy pod launched. "We thought we lost you, but we got out with 1 working engine and a prayer. We've been hiding ever since. The Enclave doesn't know how many of us made it. I kept it that way." Jace nodded. "Good. Keep it that way a little longer." "Why?" He pulled out a small hollow chip and placed it in the center of the group. "This is everything I pulled from the Tyrval cruiser. Genetic data, military scans, notes from their biolabs. They've been trying to replicate what we are. Turn us into a blueprint." The group went quiet. "They want us," Jace said. "Not because they fear us, but because they envy us." Kira's voice was sharp. "They think they can build us in a lab." "They don't understand," Jace said, leaning forward. "What we are now, that didn't come from test tubes. It came from watching our friends die in our arms, from hunting predators in acid rain, from boiling water with ship batteries just to stay alive. You can't clone that." One of the survivors, a thick-built man named Reyes, muttered, "So what do we do? Hide forever?" Jace shook his head. "We're not hiding anymore." He tapped the hollow chip again. A star map flickered to life. Dozens of systems marked in red. Colonies, council stations, resource hubs, all tied to the species that left Earth to rot. This is where we start pushing back. Kira looked at him carefully. You want a war? No, Jace said. I want a reckoning. They didn't cheer. They didn't roar. That wasn't who they were anymore. But every head nodded. They understood. That night, the storm rolled across the moon's surface, ion winds sparking blue lightning along the rock. Inside the storm bird, the humans planned, scanned, shared what they'd learned. And in orbit above them, beyond their sight, a small Tyrval probe floated silently, cloaked, listening. It recorded everything, and it sent it straight to the Galactic Council. Within hours, every system with an Enclave seal was locked down. Commanders were pulled from retirement, black sites were reactivated, and a single order echoed across the stars. Project Final Contingency, reinstated. The humans are awake. The Galactic Council convened in silence. 12 representatives from 12 of the most dominant species sat inside a cold chamber of obsidian glass and starlight, orbiting a planet no one was allowed to name. No audience, no media, no record, only one agenda: the return of humanity. High Chancellor Virith of the Vorn Dominion, a creature of scales and intellect, broke the silence first. The Tyrval confirmed the reports. The human survivor, Jace Markle, escaped containment. He now leads a cluster of survivors believed extinct. A thin avian delegate from the Zarin clade hissed. They've begun marking targets, strategic ones. They're not hiding anymore. The insectoid Maqual emissary twitched. We should have incinerated the planet when we had the chance. And invited every other species to question our morals? Virith snapped. Number Earth was quarantined, buried in bureaucracy. We told ourselves they'd fade into dust. They didn't, a voice said coldly. Everyone turned. Representative Darson of the Arivik Order, one of the few species to have fought alongside humans centuries ago, stood slowly. You didn't quarantine a species. You buried your mistake. You called them unstable. But what you feared was that they couldn't be controlled. They're unpredictable, someone muttered. They're relentless, Darson corrected. They survive the unspeakable, adapt in ways your science can't predict. And now they have a cause. Another delegate snarled, We outnumber them 1,000,000 to 1. Darson fixed him with a dead stare. So did the wildfires on Alaris 3, until one ember burned the entire continent. No one spoke for a while. Then the Chancellor whispered, Then it's agreed. Final contingency begins. Lights dimmed. A panel opened in the center of the table, revealing an ancient device, pre-galactic era tech. Banned, illegal, forgotten. Except it hadn't been forgotten. Begin production, Virith ordered. The lights on the device turned red. Begin the extinction protocol. Half a galaxy away, aboard the Stormbird, Jace sat in the cockpit, scanning frequencies. His hands moved fast, fingers instinctively rerouting power and tapping into backdoor channels once used for pre-war Terran comms. They'd picked up the signal an hour ago. A frequency long dead. Now revived. Kira watched from the doorway. You look like you've seen a ghost. Jace didn't answer at first. Then he turned, his face pale. They've reactivated final contingency. Kira's face hardened. I thought that was a myth. It's real, Jace said. Built back when the Enclave first made contact with Earth. They called it a safety switch. We called it a noose, autonomous weapons, AI-driven extermination fleets. If they couldn't control us, they'd erase us. Reyes cursed. So they're coming, all of them. No, Jace said grimly. They're not sending armies. That would be too clean. He turned the monitor toward them. Dozens of red markers, unmanned vessels moving fast, hyperlane capable, each programmed for annihilation. They're sending death, and it's already on its way. Silence fell across the room. Then Kira asked, "What do we do?" Jace stood, jaw clenched, voice low. "We do what humans have always done when the universe tries to kill us." He walked toward the weapons bay. "We survive." The first autonomous strike ship reached a human outpost near a collapsed mining belt. It was unarmed, just a beacon. But when it scanned for life, it found nothing. Just heat signatures that looked human. It moved closer. That's when the EMP burst shattered its circuits, and a hacked AI virus tore through its core. The ship never reported back. One by one, the other exterminators vanished. The Council panicked, because the humans weren't just waiting. They were learning the death machines, rewiring them, hijacking them, turning the Council's weapons into a new fleet, one born from vengeance, loss, and brilliant rage. A year later, the first human-led strike force entered orbit above a Council outpost. No demands, no diplomacy, just a message broadcast across every frequency. "You tried to erase us. You gave us a death world and thought we'd break. We turned it into our cradle. You made us monsters to survive. Now we've learned to aim." Then the sky went black, and the war began. But the Council never understood one thing. You can destroy a world, you can erase a species, but you can't kill a story. And humanity's story had just begun again, with fire, fury, and the unbreakable will to endure.